2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to meet with five incredible students and young adults who are raising awareness of eating disorders in Gen Z. I'm now excited for the opportunity to share this conversation with all of you. Only 1 in 5 adolescents seek the eating disorder treatment that they deserve. That means we have to do a better job of raising awareness, breaking down the stigma, and challenging the stereotypes around eating disorders. Without further ado, I'm excited to welcome the panelists and get this important conversation started.
So my name is Sahana, and I am an undergraduate student at the University of California, Santa Cruz, studying psychology. I'm also a long-term volunteer for the Eating Disorders Resource Center of Silicon Valley. I've been there for about 5 years at this point, and I focused a lot on education and free educational services to my community, as well as advocacy there. And yeah, that's something that I'm super passionate about. Additionally, I am a member of the Eating Disorder Coalition's Young Leaders Council, which I joined last year, and I'm super excited to continue my advocacy on a national scale. So that's a little bit about me. And then to answer Jason's question, one thing that I wish more people knew about eating disorders was I wish that people didn't really regard eating disorders as a choice. I think even as mental health has kind of shifted with this generation, there's still the stigma surrounding eating disorders, and there's still this kind of myth that some people uphold thinking that eating disorders is a choice, and that is absolutely not true. Eating disorders are a super, super serious mental health condition and mental illness, and they should be regarded as such, and they're not a choice.
So a little about me is that, well, my name is Dia, and I'm a junior at McNeil High School in Texas. I've been able to see the development of ASAP from the very start, from when it was just an idea to the nationwide program it is today. As Mr. Wood mentioned, we're hoping to expand the program to 25 different states. I believe we have expanded it to 14 states so far. So we're practically halfway there. Outside of ASAP, I'm the founder and president of my school's Eating Disorder Support and Awareness Club called EDSA, and I'm also the program directors for the All Bodies Coalitions. It's an organization. For them, I've worked to create eating disorder educational resources that can be shared with students and educators to raise better awareness and how they can offer support to these students. And to answer your question, I was initially actually also going to do that eating disorders are not a choice, but another thing that I wish more people knew about eating disorders is that recovery does not happen overnight. I know personally in my recovery, I just constantly felt that everyone around me was expecting me, oh, this is the day she'll recover, or like, why aren't you recovered yet? And they would just constantly pressure me into recovering sooner than I was capable of doing. But in reality, recovery is a long and comprehensive process that involves a bunch of things, such as physical recovery as well as mental recovery. And it just doesn't happen overnight, and it's not linear at all. And I just wish more people realize that it takes time to recover, but nonetheless, recovery is possible with the right help and resources.
So my name is Mina. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a third year at the University of Alaska, Anchorage, where I currently am located. And I do a lot of work with AKITA, which is the Alaska Eating Disorder Alliance. They have been extremely influential in helping gather resources, create support groups, just guide those who are struggling in Alaska on their journey to recovery. And I'm also working with the EDC-YLC, so the Eating Disorder Coalition Youth Leader Council. And I am super excited to be here. And to answer the question that Jason asked, I would say I wish everyone knew that eating disorders don't discriminate. So it doesn't matter what socioeconomic class you are, what race, ethnicity, what gender. It can happen to anyone at any time, right? So yeah.
Name is Monish Ramesh, and I'm a senior at Wayzata High School, located in the suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota. A part of the ANAD ASAP program, I run an Instagram account called Gen Z Against Eating Disorders, which is designed to spread awareness on eating disorders while encouraging those struggling to reach out for help and find that path of recovery. And I made an Instagram since I wanted to specifically spread awareness to adolescents, and also since social media is filled with so much negativity already, I kind of wanted to spread a little bit of positivity. One thing I wish people knew about eating disorders, I was going to say that there's like no telling factor, like no sexual orientation, race, or gender, but also that there's nothing like as sick enough. Like you don't have to be a certain weight, or like you don't have to be sick enough for eating disorder help. If you're struggling, then you should definitely reach out for that help.
All right, and I completely echo that, and all the things that you all shared throughout the introductions. All four of those, I feel like we could stop the conversation right here, and we got the important messages out just like that. But we've got to have a conversation. That's what this day is all about, is talking about eating disorders in Gen Z. So I want to go ahead and just open up the conversation now to all of the panelists. And our first question that I wanted to throw out there are, what are some of the common misconceptions or the stereotypes that you're hearing about eating disorders from your peers or you're hearing in school? What are the conversations? What are the barriers that you're running into right now in the work that you're doing?
Was that I feel like people think that people with eating disorders hate food, but I don't think that's necessarily true, because as someone who's like struggled with stuff like that before, and yeah, I feel like I never hated food. It's just that I like and made it the enemy, and I still love food, and I've loved food all my life. So yeah.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. Like something like this, it was so ironic because it literally came up in class like 2 days ago, where I was like just sitting there doing my work, and behind me, I hear this girl be like, "Oh, I didn't eat all day," and then the other person, "What? Are you anorexic?" And I was just like, "What?" Like I was sitting there hearing their conversation. I was like, "What is going on?" People have these misconceptions about eating disorders that like a person with an eating disorder just doesn't eat, or like they just don't like food and they just want to be like skinny or like lose weight, or like they have this one schema about eating disorders that people with eating disorders have it for this reason and do this thing, which is totally not true, because there's so many different types of eating disorders, first of all, and the reasoning behind why someone might develop it is so complex, and it's most likely a combination of both physical appearance factors as well as like complex emotional factors that cause them to develop it. And I just feel like that's such a big misconception, especially at school, where people just pass these like casual comments and they don't realize how other people in the room might feel when they hear them.
Yeah, I really just wanted to like go off of that in that like eating disorders, I think people have to recognize are filling something for that person. Like they're never happening for no reason, kind of like we talked about in the introductions. There's always something that that person is trying to gain by participating in those behaviors, whether that's a sense of control or to, you know, I feel like control is was something that I really was a big theme when I was struggling. But also that another like huge misconception, kind of like what we were talking about before, during our introductions, we kind of really highlighted these things. But yeah, eating disorders don't happen to just white females, which I feel like is the huge demographic that like if you say someone with an eating disorder, that's going to be the thought that comes to mind. And so again, eating disorders don't discriminate. It can happen to anyone. And like Dia was saying, the emotional and physical and like societal surroundings are so complicated and so intricate, and cannot be broken down into like one sentence or to describe all people with them. So.
Yeah, kind of echoing off of what everyone was saying. I think another thing that a lot of people don't realize is there's like more than one type of eating disorder. Like, I think very often people just think of eating disorders as like anorexia. And, they have this one very, very specific idea of what it is, and they kind of just roll with that. And I think society in general sometimes makes it to be like that's the only type of eating disorder that can exist, and all other types of eating disorders are invalid. And I think that's absolutely untrue. There's so many different types of eating disorders. You know, of course, anorexia, like we mentioned, bulimia, binge eating disorder, ARFID, and so many more that I haven't even named. And all of those eating disorders are valid, and everyone who struggles from all types of eating disorders should have equitable access to care. And I think that a barrier to seeking care even is the fact that a lot of people don't even recognize that they have eating disorders because society has told them that an eating disorder should look like this, and if you don't fit into this box then you don't have an eating disorder and you should be fine. And I think that's absolutely untrue.
Yeah, that's such a great point because no two eating disorders look the same. It's different for everybody. What the factors that cause it to develop are different for everybody, and it's complex, like it's been mentioned on this panel, and also the types. And even no two types of eating disorders. You could have anorexia and somebody else could have anorexia, but your experiences could still be completely different. It's just it varies so much, and unfortunately I was like that too. I didn't think, one, it could happen to me because, yeah, I didn't meet the stereotypes like what Mina was talking about, but two, because I didn't fit, that box. I didn't check all the boxes for a specific type, so I figured, I'm not that sick, I'm fine, I don't need help. So I do think that is causing a lot of problems. So I guess, how do we change that? What can we do right now to raise awareness and to, change maybe some of these misconceptions and stereotypes that are out there?
Before we like fully dive into that question, I just wanted to go off of what you were saying real quick, Jason, of how like if you don't check the boxes, you're like it doesn't matter. It's not like what's happening isn't really happening. And I guess this does kind of go into the question that you just asked, but I think a lot of it has to do with access to care and who is providing access to care, but insurance companies. And insurance companies have a very, very finite view of what constitutes an eating disorder. And if it hasn't already been inferred, I did go to treatment for an eating disorder, and the amount of people that were cut from treatment simply because they had maintained the correct BMI, even though I see them struggling every single day. So physically, they're there. Physically, they've gained the weight back or done whatever, but mentally, they are so far from being okay and being able to like tackle life, with the adequate tools. So I think really shedding light on part of the reason everyone thinks that eating disorders are those who are super, super skinny and have anorexia is because that's really all insurance will cover if like you need that treatment. So I really think starting to expand that everyone deserves these resources. If you're struggling with food, you deserve these resources. And it isn't as finite as the insurance companies make it out to be. So yeah, I think that's definitely like a really big like national problem. And then kind of like filtering down that ideology through society, which I'm hoping my other panelists will answer.
No, I literally like 100% agree. And it's so funny you brought it up because I was actually looking into some I want to get more into public policy work. So I was looking into like policies regarding eating disorder treatment and such. And I found an interesting article. I don't recall who it was written by, but it was basically talking about exactly what you said about how insurance company only choose to cover what they want to cover. And many insurance companies don't even cover like they only cover it up to a certain amount of time. If they see that the patient isn't getting better or isn't gaining any weight or whatever it is, they like just stop covering for their treatment. And I even in the article it talked about a specific case where this girl literally died from her eating disorder because her treatment team her like treatment only went up until a certain amount of time, and then they saw that she wasn't gaining weight, so they stopped covering, and then her family couldn't afford it, and she unfortunately died from the health consequences of an eating disorder. And personally, too, I would not disclose it, but I worked with an eating disorder recovery like program, and it was actually I wasn't very I don't know. It was very interesting because their whole thing was, as my parents told me, because they worked with my parents mostly, it was like a family based treatment. It was like, we're hoping to get Dia up to a certain weight, and then after that, she'll be okay. Like, they didn't give any other resources or like, and that's a big thing of why I feel like my recovery took a bit longer because my parents didn't understand how to treat an eating disorder and what they were hearing from these recovery professionals, which they would get their advice like they would think their what they're saying is more like accurate than me as someone who's in an eating disorder, of course. Like they wouldn't trust what I was saying because obviously I was still struggling at that time. And they would just hear what they're saying, like, oh, our goal is just to get Dia up to this BMI, and then after that, she's done. Like, she's done with treatment, she's treated. And they would just hear that and be like, okay, I guess that's right. Because they don't know what an eating disorder is. They weren't like familiar with this before. And I just feel like this misconception that it's just related to your weight or just related to your health is so untrue because mental health is just as important as physical health, if not more. So I just feel like right now there needs to be more of a emphasis placed on how we can improve mental health, while obviously physical health is important, but how we can improve these both aspects of our health at the same time instead of prioritizing one over the other.
I just want to kind of piggyback on what both of you were saying and talk a little bit about how like education is super super important in terms of speaking up about eating disorders. And I think all of us as panelists have experience, in eating disorder education a little bit. So I think that's something that we can all speak to. But Dia, especially when you're saying like your parents were in this very precarious situation where you know they don't really know like what an eating disorder is. They don't understand, that it's both mental and physical. Um, and so I think education is so, so, so important. I think so many people across the nation don't understand or know what an eating disorder is. They have literally no idea like what that means, what the mental health consequences or physical health consequences are. And so I think that something that I'm really passionate about is going into my community and speaking to children from schools, like students, speaking to college students, speaking to even mental health professionals who might encounter eating disorders at some point in their career and might not really know how to tackle that, and really making sure that they're aware of the resources that are available if they do come across that in their career. But yeah, I think it's really, really unfortunate, like you both were saying, that insurance companies and even eating disorder treatment centers sometimes completely disregard the mental side of eating disorders, especially seeing as many eating disorders coexist with other mental health illnesses such as anxiety and depression. And I think education, especially in the younger generation, and educating our generation through whatever means possible, and making sure that this is an issue that we can slowly start to solve within our generation is really important, I think.
Yeah, like kind of adding on, I feel like society in general, they know what eating disorders are, but they just like have a misconception of it. Like if you look at the mainstream media and their representation of eating disorders in movies and like social media, it's just so false. And social media, in a lot of ways, they kind of glorify eating disorders as a way to like, oh, you can control yourself, you can control your weight, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like it's very important to kind of like change social media and educate people that it's like not something that's light. It's something that's very, very deadly and very important to address.
I want to go ahead, though, really quickly and introduce Taylor, who was just able to join us. Taylor is another wonderful ANAD student ambassador, leading a support group and everything, one of our first on-campus peer support groups. Taylor, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself really quick and tell us one thing that you would want everybody else to know about an eating disorder?
Yeah, so my name is Taylor. Thank you for that introduction, Jason. I appreciate it. I have been working with students at Florida State. We've opened and kind of started a peer support group in its style, but more on campus. And it's been going really well so far. We've had a lot of support, which has been really helpful. I'd say one thing I would love if everyone did know, I'm not sure if this has been mentioned yet, but if everyone did know about eating disorders that would be a real game changer would be just that they don't discriminate based on, weight, age, gender, age. I guess I already said age, but race, whatever it may be. So I guess, yeah, I know a lot of times there's often this picture that pops into people's head of somebody with an eating disorder, and that picture is often very skewed towards a certain aesthetic that, like you were saying, is kind of glorified a little bit. And so I think it's important to note that that's not always representative of all people with eating disorders.
All right. Thanks so much, Taylor. And yes, thank you for driving that fact home. We mentioned it earlier in the conversation before you were able to join us, but it's so important to talk about that again, that eating disorders do not discriminate. So if you're sitting there right now saying, well, I don't match with the description of an eating disorder, so that's not me. Think again. It could happen to anybody. So definitely, if you have any eating disorder or eating concerns at all, talk to somebody. So let's go ahead and keep the conversation moving here. And I do want to touch on social media. So really, Gen Z, I feel like, you've been the social media generation. Luckily, I got a little lucky where social media didn't really come about until after I'd already graduated high school. But I'm just curious, what role do you think social media is playing in the development of eating disorders, in the barriers that we're seeing to eating disorder treatment? And also, are there any positives out there when it comes to social media? Is there anything we can do on social media to maybe raise awareness and help other people learn and some of that education that Sahana was talking about? So I'm curious to get the panel's thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, kind of speaking to what I was talking about previously, I think social media at the current moment is, you know, pretty overwhelmingly negative at this point. I would say in terms of perpetuating all these like stereotypes about eating disorders, but also, you know, maybe perpetuating eating disorders themselves in a lot of ways with the content that's being shown on social media. Like I feel like if I were to just go and scroll through TikTok or scroll through Instagram, a lot of my feed might, if just like we're starting from a clean blank slate, a lot of my feed might just be body check videos or like what I eat in a day videos or things that, while they might seem harmless, if you are constantly infiltrated with that 24/7 while you're scrolling can be super harmful. And I know that that has a really negative impact on my mental health, not to mention all like the photo editing and all that stuff that takes place and the unrealistic um, expectations, like body standards that are perpetuated every day on social media. I think that's really, really difficult, especially for younger children to see, especially because they don't really realize what's real and what's not real. And, you know, these what I eat in a day videos or body check videos, younger kids seeing that and thinking that that's the ideal body or that's what they need to achieve in life is super, super negative. And I think we're already seeing the impact of that, and especially in our generation, in the younger generation. But on the flip side, I really do hope that one day, and I think it's slowly started now, but one day we can use social media as a tool for change and as a tool for positivity, especially within the body image space and the eating disorder space. Um, because right now it's a little discouraging to go onto social media and see all this stuff that's on there.
I definitely agree. Social media is definitely not become, it has been for a while now, a really negative space for not only eating disorders, but so many other types of it, just perpetuating so many other types of unrealistic beauty standards. But I do believe that it can also be used as a way to advocate for these changes, such as Monish's Instagram account and also other Instagram accounts that are now starting to speak up about these issues and raise awareness. And while it may not reach as many people right now, I really believe that if we consistently find ways to promote and advocate for what we believe is right, and because it is right, it's not okay for these accounts to promote unrealistic standards or promote like harmful content. And I believe that if we find ways to advocate for this on social media, it can help reach a greater audience than just like, I don't know, like non-social media methods, like just speaking, like how many people do you just like speak to on a daily basis? Whereas on social media, you can reach like millions of people if you happen to go viral. So I really believe that social media, while it's in a negative space right now, it can also be harnessed as a tool for positivity and hopefully really good change in the future.
Yeah, like in my school, I'm actually researching how social media affects body image perceptions in adolescence. And I noticed that comparing to the past, now like since social media's rise, there have been more cases of eating disorders or like more cases of negative body image perceptions in adolescents and teenagers. And I feel like that's definitely due to the fact like with the what I eat in a day is that we like previously talked about, because they usually start with like, oh, a body check. And then I feel like people think that, oh, if I eat like them, I'm going to look like them. And I feel like it's very important to kind of, like, because there's no way you can control what someone posts on social media. But there's definitely a way that you can kind of look at that and like know that, oh, this isn't necessarily true. And this isn't necessarily what my body needs to thrive.
Yeah, and I think similar to what I'm hearing, like combined, is that on social media there does tend to be a trend of like specific focus on body image and on like the food that's being consumed. And it doesn't always, emphasize the points that like there's also exhaustion. There's also, maybe not talking to your friends as much. Like you're not as social. You're not like there's certain sides that I feel like on social media are portrayed as more glamorous. And it circles around the body and the food and not all the other things like the emotions, the shame, whatever it might be that doesn't tend to come up on social media. But yeah, I agree a lot with what Di is saying as well about the positive side too. I have seen a lot of recent influencers kind of pop up on my feed with intuitive eating or health at every size content, which I feel like is really helpful and can kind of pop in our minds throughout the day. If so much of that content we decide to follow, we see it on our feed, and then throughout the day we're thinking, okay, this is okay even if I haven't done this today, or I'm able to still eat this food that honors my body. Um, Things like that. So yeah, I see definitely there's a negative side and definitely there's a positive side.
I just wanted to touch on how, like, we think of social media as like this defined space, right? So like you're either on social media, like you're actively on it or you're not. But I think it's also important to recognize that even if you may not be receiving the content that we've kind of been touching on today, it's like maybe your friend is, and then that underlying bias comes out in a comment or a question or like a just like offhanded whisper or something, right? And so like I just want to like I guess, recognize the fact that the influence that social media has that influence when you're actively scrolling or whatever, but it also has that influence when you're just interacting, like we've been doing for millennia, right? Just interacting and talking to people, because those ideas, those biases, those values can really like bury their way and then kind of underneath these like comments. And so, but I also just want to like also hope to empower everyone that if you're going on social media and you're starting to like come off of social media and just feel like crap, like, oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I didn't yada yada yada. Really just like trying to do what you can to like refresh your algorithm, right? So blocking accounts that just are like not stuff you want to see, following accounts that are super body positive and mentally flexible, because I think mental flexibility is a huge part that I think Taylor was talking on too, of like when you're in these traps of an eating disorder, you are so inflexible. It doesn't matter what kind of eating disorder you have. Like things are very black and white, right?
Thanks so much. And that reminds me of something that I always try to share with folks when I'm talking about eating disorder awareness and using social media is every time you're about to unlock your screen or open up that app and start scrolling through social media, ask yourself, am I using this right now to compare myself to other people, or am I using this to connect to other people? And if you're using it to compare, maybe it's time to put the phone down, put that screen away, and use it when you're ready to connect with people, because then it can be a really powerful tool. And it did. It helped me in my recovery connect with other people. But at the same time, when I would go on there and compare, it just fed right into my eating disorder. So I think that's an important question that we can all ask ourselves every time we go to, start scrolling the feeds. Another question that I want to toss out to the entire panel is, what if somebody's listening right now and they're concerned about a friend? They're concerned about one of their peers. Perhaps they have a child who is, in college or in high school right now and showing signs of a possible eating disorder. How do you start that conversation? What do you have any advice for them on how to navigate those initial conversations or help somebody who might be struggling?
Yes, I can go ahead and get started. I think the utmost important thing is just showing that person that you're there for them. So maybe because I think people can go into like starting a conversation with the utmost intention of helping that person. And, maybe it's starting off with just, hey, I noticed you might be struggling. Did you want to talk about it? And that person might instantly shut down, right? Because maybe their eating disorder is screaming at them, going like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh God, oh my God, we've been found out. We must evacuate. We must never talk to this human again. Um, and I've experienced some moments like that. But I think if you just show that person that if they ever need someone to talk to, if they ever need someone to just sit there and just be together, that support of just space, holding space for that person can really help them open up. And then maybe they can come back to you and say, hey, when you mentioned that you saw me struggling, I really didn't want to confront it, but like maybe it's that late night drive or whatever, and they start opening up to you. Yeah, this is what I've kind of been noticing. This is what I've been feeling. So I think you can start the conversation, but also like taking a step back and just being there is how the conversation is really going to continue.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. Not only I think that being there is important, but staying there is also so important. I cannot stress this enough. Like, just being patient with whoever you're confronting about the eating disorder, whether it be your friend or, I don't know, your child or just anybody you know, you have to not only let them know that you're going to be there for them, but you have to be patient throughout this process because, as I mentioned before, Recovery does not happen in one day. It's not linear. There will be ups and downs. And you can't get fed up with the person. I know a lot of people become impatient and try to force recovery on someone else. And initially, they're there for the first half, couple of weeks. They're there and they're fully there supporting them. But then once they start to realize that this might take longer, then they slowly start to back off and just sort of get distant. I feel like many people with eating disorders don't reach out for help because they feel like they'll be a burden if they ask out. And it's just, it's not that severe anyways that you have to reach out for help. But the thing is, no matter at what stage you are in your eating disorder, it's always severe. And so I think the biggest thing is to just believe in them, because with the right support, I truly believe that everybody can recover.
I definitely like believe that like patience is a very big thing. And also I like everyone has to realize that when someone has an eating disorder or they're struggling with these eating thoughts, you can't like force them to want to recover. Like obviously they're going to be like, "Oh, this is my whole life." Cuz when you're struggling with an eating disorder, it feels like everything. Like that's just like your number one thing. It feels like your extracurricular activity that you love to do. It feels like what your life revolves around. So I feel like it's important to realize that like when someone's struggling, they're like you have to show them that you want them to be healthy. Like you can't treat them like they're like not human. You have to treat them normal still, even though they're struggling with something, because that definitely helps them like want to recover and want to live their life happily and healthily.
Yeah, I really want to echo off of what everyone said. I think everyone made some really, really great points. And I also want to maybe encourage some of our younger listeners to not be afraid of talking to a trusted adult, especially like a school counselor or a school teacher, because this can be a very daunting conversation to have, especially if you see a friend who you believe is struggling, but you don't really know where to start that conversation, or you don't want to overstep or make them feel uncomfortable. Um, I think talking to a school counselor or talking to a teacher, a therapist, or some trusted adult in your life who you know is like available and willing to have those conversations with you, I think can be super, super helpful and super important, especially because it's not easy to have these conversations for either party sometimes. Not just the person who might be struggling with the eating disorder, but also for the friend who's approaching them or the loved one who's approaching them. It can be a very difficult conversation to have. So I think kind of assessing all your resources, and I'm sure the ANAD website also has some great resources for that as well. Maybe Jason can talk about that. But I think reaching out to a trusted adult can really help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll jump in there really quick. If you are worried about somebody, give the helpline a call. The ANAD helpline is available to answer questions or to help support you while you're supporting other people. So we are here to answer those questions. We've got a guide on the website too called the Support at Every Stage Guide that has some tools and some tips in there for starting those conversations and having those types of conversations. While we're on this topic of providing support and resources, I really want to kind of get your thoughts on this, Taylor, as far as the peer support aspect of things and what you've seen down at Florida State in terms of having that on-campus resource and that peer support group. Why do you think peer-led support is so important for Gen Z?
Yeah, I think peer support is honestly such a life-changing model to have in place. I think the fact, especially with eating disorders, you think about some of the thoughts that go through our heads or the conceptions that we hold about food or our body or the way we are supposed to interact with food or our body. I think sometimes explaining these things to, a loved one, though they may care and though they may have good intentions and it can be very helpful, I think it can sometimes be a little different and hard for them to understand if they haven't experienced these thoughts or these feelings themselves, because some of these things sound a little strange. But when there's a peer support person involved, what I've heard a lot of students say, and just a lot of people receiving peer support say in the past, it's so helpful to have somebody who understands. And I can agree with that too, having been a part of peer support programs in my recovery, having somebody who knows what it's like and who's going to say, no, that's not a weird thought to have. That's completely normal. You're not alone in that. Like, for example, sometimes saying, oh, I feel like I'm not sick enough to a family member might be for them, they're like, well, isn't that like a good thing? If you say it to a peer supporter, it might be different because they can understand kind of where that mindset is leading and where that comes from and how it's not necessarily in your mind always the most positive thought. So things like that kind of that is hard for loved ones to understand or people who care about us to understand, kind of filling in that gap.
I just wanted to like really reiterate that sometimes people really have the best intention, and they just still can't grasp it yet. And that's something I've really recognized in my work with Akita. We've been doing a lot of work reaching out to school districts around Alaska, and we went to this big like district-wide conference, and people are like, this is amazing, this is amazing, and then go and say like the most triggering sentence ever. And you're just like, some people they understand that like this is something that needs to be worked on and something that like cannot be ignored, but like the just like the mindset that has been, or not mindset isn't like the right term, but just the like culture that people live in can really really run deep, right? And so it's important to recognize that sometimes people will say things that just like do not help. And yeah, I really agree with Taylor on that. It's so beneficial to have someone who understands exactly where your quote unquote crazy thoughts are coming from, right? So
Mina, you brought up a great point, and it's actually the next question that I want to touch on. And this is kind of general for the whole group, but I'm going to direct it towards you first, because I know that you've got the passion of working with student athletes in particular. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what can coaches and parents of maybe student athletes look out for, and how can they provide support? And then I guess to the rest of the panelists, what can schools do? What would you like to see your high school or your university do to help support students who might be struggling with an eating disorder? So, Mina, I'll throw it to you first for that kind of that student athlete perspective.
yeah, for sure. So I was a student athlete, so I've definitely seen how things can go not so great. But I think the mindset that would really just benefit everyone is the mindset like that it's the person first and the athlete second. And whether that's the coach's mindset, the parents' mindset, the student's mindset, I think some really big red flags is like never resting, right? Never allowing yourself rest. So whether that's I feel like crap today, but the coach said we need to do intervals, so I'm going to do the intervals, even though I feel like crap and should probably just like either do a super like chill workout or just not work out at all. Or I just finished a 2-hour practice, but I feel like I didn't get enough out of that practice, so I'm going to go work out for another hour. Um, those are all like really big red flags to look out for. Again, you should be prioritizing your health, your recovery from a workout. Workouts take recovery, right? You can't just work out and then do something really intense and then the next day just pop back up and be ready to do it again, right? You need to listen to your body. You need to not let coaches tell you how your body is. And if your body is feeling one way, to listen to that and to respect that, and to decide what you're doing that day with that. So yeah, I think that understanding if you put the person before the athletics, that person will always do better in the athletics, right? So if you're pushing someone 112%, they're going to do great for about 3 months. right? And then they're going to fall off because that's not sustainable. But if you're working with someone and going and they're really in tune to their body during that whole process and taking the breaks that they need and pushing it when they feel they can push it, then that athlete, that person is going to be able to succeed. So, yeah, I think really just we all live in a body, pay attention to that body, listen to what it's telling you, and then go from there.
I kind of want to piggyback off of what Mina was saying because I also grew up a student athlete. Like ever since I was in elementary school, I was playing sports, I was swimming, and I completely like what you said, Mina, completely resonated with me because very often I was told by my coaches that I had to do this set or I had to do this workout or I had to do these multiple workouts in a day. And if I didn't do that, then I was lazy or I didn't want it bad enough, or I wasn't working as hard as everyone else, even if it was like literally killing my body to do. And even if I didn't have ample rest and recovery, even as someone who's 10, 11, or 12 years old. And, what you said really, really resonated with me because looking back at it, that's not okay. Right. And I think for younger athletes, especially who don't really realize that you should be paying attention to your body, you should be paying attention to your rest and recovery, especially, at that age and especially as you're growing older. Um, I think it can be difficult to advocate for yourself against figures that you might see as authority figures, but kind of like what Mino is saying, I think it's really, 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 really important to listen to your body and really important to realize that, like Mina was saying, you as a person should come ahead of your sport and your mental health should come ahead of your sport because at the end of the day, that's going to help your sport. It's not going to hurt your sport. And to all the young athletes out there listening, I think if you take a message away from this, just recognize that it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to listen to your body. It's okay to skip a practice or two every week if you're not really feeling up to it, because doing that practice and pushing yourself like 110% is going to be less beneficial for you and your mental health in the long run.
Yes, thank you for that. And one of the things I go around and I speak to a lot of student athletes, and I always tell them that if they've got a coach or a trainer who's pushing them and like, ignoring their eating disorder concerns or body concerns, give me their name. Like I want to go talk to them. Like, it's one of those things where we have to do everything we can to educate coaches and trainers and people who are those kind of authority figures, especially for student athletes. And I think the same can be said if you shift over to just the social workers that are on campus or the student wellness centers that you've got on campus and the counselors. We see it a lot here at ANAD recently where they're reaching out to us because they simply don't know how to support their students with an eating disorder. So we've got to do more to give them the tools and the resources to be able to support students. And one of the cool things that the ANAD Student Ambassador Program does is it creates those connections on campus and it empowers the students to be able to go out there and advocate for change on their campus. So I want to throw this question out to the ambassadors that we have on the call now. But if somebody's listening and they want to get involved, they want to create that change at their campus, what advice would you have to give them? What have you learned in your experience as an ambassador that maybe somebody else could use at their school?
For somebody who's wanting to start out, I remember, I think personally in my eating disorder journey, I felt like most of my friends knew that I was struggling with an eating disorder. And you know how high schools are. Like, word just spreads. If somebody is like dealing with something or something, people just spread rumors and stuff like that. So it actually made it really uncomfortable for me to actually speak up about any of this. So I think something that really helped me sort of bring more awareness of how serious this topic is at my campus is to reach out outside my school first. I know I reached out to Mr. Wood summer actually talking about my passion for eating disorder advocacy and my own recovery and just journey with everything and how I wanted to speak up at my campus. I feel like if you have another set of eyes and another person supporting you outside of your school environment, if you feel like your school environment is not at that point where it's comfortable for you to speak up and you fear that you might maybe judged, reaching out to these other organizations such as ANAD, for example, and just getting the help and support you need from someone else to empower you to speak up about your experiences can be really helpful because through this ASAP program, I've gotten so many resources and useful materials. Like we have a training hub and a training portal where we've been able to complete all these modules talking to us about how we can create change at our campus. And through this, I've really been able to step out of my comfort zone and speak up about a topic that I wasn't initially comfortable to speak up about. And it's actually really powerful to see about how speaking up about my experiences can help other people speak up as well. And it's really beautiful seeing how one just one person being brave enough to speak up can empower so many other people in doing the same thing.
Yeah, and I have been inspired by all the stuff that you've been doing, Dia. It's been incredible. Also, I guess, Mina, I would love for you to share more about how people could get connected with all the amazing stuff that you're doing at Akita and with EDC.
Yeah, for sure. I am truly Akita's biggest advocate. So I would love everyone to go check out their website. They have just a website that you can go to, alaskaeatingdisorderalliance.com or .org. One of the two. If you type in Alaska Eating Disorder Alliance, it will be the first one that pops up. And then on there, they have, like I mentioned, a lot of different resources. They have support groups for those who are struggling, but also support groups just for like family members and friends who may know someone and not really know how to approach things, kind of what we've been talking about today. They also have a really great film called Winning at All Costs, Breaking the Silence on Athlete and Eating Disorders. And it kind of goes into the things that Shahana and I were talking about today and how you need to treat the person like the person before you treat the person as just an athlete. And then a lot of different stories and some really good points they bring up. It's only a 30-minute film, so I highly recommend everyone watching it. And it's actually the main person is Holly Brooks, who is a two-time Olympian and now a licensed therapist. So she definitely gives some really great advice and stories and has some really cool perspective. So that is Akita. And then the Eating Disorder Coalition, again, you can look them up online and they have lots of resources there. The Eating Disorder Coalition and the Youth Leaders Council is mainly there to help create that national change. So we're there to help advocate for bills or laws or anything at the national level that can help support either those who are providing support for eating disorders or help increase education surrounding certain things. All of these really great aspects. So I highly encourage everyone who's interested to go do a little Google search and see what you can find because there's always something new and exciting happening on both of those websites.
Well, thanks for all the amazing work that you're doing out there to change this narrative and raise awareness. And Sahana, do you want to add anything for the Eating Disorder Coalition part, and then tell us a little bit more about the Eating Disorder Resource Center?
Yes, of course. So I think Mina pretty much covered like anything that I was going to say about the EDC and the work that the EDC does. And yeah, as a part of the Young Leaders Council, Mina and I are part of a really, really wonderful youth-led team who advocates for eating disorders on the national level. And that's something that we're super excited about doing and we're super excited about continuing to do. And then as for the EDRC or the Eating Disorders Resource Center of Silicon Valley is a Bay Area, so that's in California. It's a Bay Area based nonprofit organization that really focuses on creating awareness and raising advocacy and also um, just advocating for equitable treatment of eating disorders within the Bay Area and beyond. So, kind of similar to Akita, the EDRC has free support groups, not only for those who are struggling, but also for family, friends, and loved ones who might know somebody with an eating disorder. EDRC's website is edrcsv.org if you want to go visit the website and like find out all the resources that EDRC has over there. And EDRC also runs an annual multimedia contest that I really encourage all middle schoolers and high schoolers who are watching this to maybe go and check that out on EDRC's website. It's a super cool contest, and you can submit artwork and poetry and writing and all these things that kind of promote self-love and positivity and all of those things. So if you're listening, I really, really encourage you to go to EDRC's website. Again, that's edrcsv.org. Or if you just, like Mina was saying, type it into Google, it should be the first thing that comes up. But yeah, I really encourage you to go check out their website. They also have great resources for advocating for insurance treatment, which is something that we talked about right now. If you are at all having any issues with insurance or anything, you can totally just give EDRC a call or send an email, and we would be more than happy to help with that.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And I had no idea about the contest. So I'm going to have to talk to you offline about that because that's pretty cool and that's amazing work. So thank you for all that you're doing. Before we go ahead and wrap it up, I don't know where this last hour went. It went really fast. I could talk for a whole nother hour, but we've got to move on to another topic as the day of conversation just continues to roll on here. But before we say goodnight, I want to get a resource from each one of you. If there's any good podcasts out there right now, or books or films. I know we just talked about winning at all costs. Are there any resources out there? Maybe a social media account that people should be following. So I guess as we close out this conversation, I just love for each one of you to share maybe something that's inspiring for you or you think might help raise some awareness around eating disorders or mental health.
I can start us off. First off, I just want to say how inspiring it is to be a part of this conversation and to see how this conversation has, though it has not obviously reached everyone, it's still reaching more and more people every day. And that is like truly the greatest thing ever. As far as a resource, I'll shout back out the Winning at All Costs, Breaking the Silence on Athletes and Eating Disorder film. But I also want to shout out the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I can't remember off the top of my head who it's written by, but again, if you type it on to Google, it will be there. And it is really just about being trauma informed and the way that trauma affects your nervous system and your just the way that you live life. And I think it can be really powerful and important, and really just give you a lot of like empathy when interacting with the world and interacting with other people.
Yeah, so I don't really have like a specific resource to share, but I do want to encourage everyone to continue to practice self-care. And, I think something as simple as just like doing skincare or reading a book or like doing whatever it takes to make you feel good whenever you need it. I think that's super, super important. And yeah, I just kind of want to thank Jason so much for allowing us this platform to speak on Gen Z and eating disorders. I think these are conversations that unfortunately don't happen very much. And I'm really honored to be here with all of you guys who are advocates and, trailblazers in your community all in your own right. So thank you so much, Jason, for this platform.
On your question, if we have any resources, of course, ANAD will be my number one resource for any eating disorder support. They truly have so many services. They have free peer support groups. They have resource guides. They have hotlines. They have the ASAP Ambassador program. But other than that, it's been a long time since I've read it, but I remember that when I had initially started my recovery, and I used to think that a big factor that went into whether or not I wanted to recover was like my eating disorder wouldn't have that, like, it wasn't that severe, so it wouldn't impact me. So like, why even bother with recovery if it wasn't gonna like impact me that much? But a book that my dad got me, it's called Love Fat by Tabita. I probably jacked up her name. I don't know her last name, but again, if you search it up, it's called Love Fat. It's an autobiography. It is very detailed, I will say that. I don't remember like exact details, but it's a very detailed autobiography about the author's experience with anorexia nervosa. And it just really helped open my eyes. I feel like this book is a great resource for maybe if you're maybe if you get easily triggered, I wouldn't recommend it, but just for parents and people who just want to learn more about eating disorders, this book is a great resource just to see how what it feels like to be inside the mind of somebody who has an eating disorder.
I don't have a specific resource as well, but I definitely think that it's important to make sure that your social media feed is something that is positive for you. And some easy ways you can do that are like if you see anything that's triggering or negative, you can like on Instagram, you can click not interested, or just simply like following accounts that are body positive and are pro like recovery. Like for example, my own Instagram, Gen Z Against EDs.
Another resource that I found out about not too long ago, actually, that I think is really unique and helpful is Project Heal has a meal support program. And it's kind of like a virtual program where you can go on if you need help with accountability or just emotional support or even just a distraction during a meal. You can kind of go log on to kind of like a Zoom situation and talk to somebody who's been trained to help support you through whatever meal you're going through. So they have several times a day that they can meet for meals. And a lot of times the conversation will be geared towards distraction. You won't necessarily be talking so much about what you're eating or how the meal's going unless you feel like you need support and that's available at the moment. But yeah, I think those are great resources. And yeah, I just want to thank Jason so much for organizing this and setting this all up. And I am so glad that I've gotten to share this space with all of you so far today and so inspired by all the work you're doing.
I'm the one that's grateful for you taking the time out of your day to join me for this conversation and for all the incredible work that each one of you are doing. It's been amazing to be able to spend this time together. For some of us, this was our first time together, and I definitely hope it wasn't our last. I look forward to additional conversations down the road and keeping connected. So thank you everyone for tuning in as ANAD's Day of Conversation continues. Again, I want to thank all of our panelists. And if you're watching the recording of this, we will make sure to have a lot of the resources that we listed today included in the description so you can easily access them. Again, thank you, panelists. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and take care.